Opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work. Thomas Edison, American inventor and businessman. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. Just want to make a quick note for anybody that's listening that I have finally gotten myself in gear and we will be putting these episodes out in audio format. So if you'd prefer like Spotify, iTunes, or what have you, the episodes will be there. They will be a day late. My goal was hopefully to have them on the same day, but because of time and other things, I just don't know that I can necessarily get done with the show, a live show, and then edit quickly enough to get it out that same day. So it'll probably be the next day. That's where if I can get it, if I can get it reasonable timing, I don't want to drop it at like 10 p.m. and say, yeah, I got it on the same day. That seems absurd. So I might as well just set it up for a nice, to be nice and prepared for the morning. So that's what we're up to. And by the way, as I was editing, I realized just how bad my ahs and ums and other filler words that I like to use are. And wow, now I'm going to be self-conscious about it. I'm trying to really not use the filler words. You might have thought I'd never been to a Toastmasters meeting in my entire life, but I promise you I have. I guess I've just gotten lazy. I'm not really sure what's going on. But anyway, we will try to resolve that as we go along. So what's going on today? Freedom of opportunity. Mark Cuban, I did an episode a while back about DEI and Mark Cuban, and I kind of walked through it, and he was making these complaints, and he was saying, this is not what DEI is. It's this new thing. And he was trying to like redefine it in a sense. And I went back and I looked up DEI on websites like Harvard and other places. And I was like, this is what they said. This is how they defined it. And it is contrary to what he was trying to say it was today. But he's still at it. And he's going back and forth with a bunch of people about DEI. And so I thought, let's do something a little bit crazy today. Let's read an excerpt from a book, and it's a fairly lengthy one. Like it's not like 20 pages lengthy, but it's lengthy in terms of reading something live. But I'm going to do it, and then along the way, I'll insert commentary, and I'll put it up on the screen. So if you're watching, you will be able to follow along with your eyeballs. And if you're just listening, then I'll do my best to make it clear when I am reading and when I am inserting my own thoughts and opinions as we go along. And the reason why I want to do this is because I think the underlying, I think things like DEI and terms like equity and equality and all these things that we're seeing, they're very attractive because people want other people to have similar opportunity. We don't want to make we don't want to leave the guy outside in a wheelchair sitting outside because there's only stairs. We want the guy to be able to come into the building with us. But as we're going to see as I read through this excerpt, I think it's misplaced in many cases. So if we're talking about access inside of a building, access to cross a road, like the corners of the roads are sometimes leveled in such a way that a wheelchair can go over them. If we're talking about those kind of things, then I think it does make sense to try to level the playing field in a sense. But when it comes to people producing, when it comes to people delivering things, I don't think it's a good idea. And I think it actually harms people. And we're going to walk through it. So let me show you just what kind of spurred this conversation for me. And by the way, I do want to point out, I actually have an idea for, yeah, I've got something in the works and it's going to be pretty heavy. And, I'm not even, tell you, yeah, yeah, I will. Uh, Well, I'm trying to debate. I'm doing the show off the cuff here. Well, not entirely off the cuff, but I'm making some decisions here. So I'm working on there was an essay that was written, and I thought there was some pretty insidious language in there, and so I'm working on it, and that one. I want to do that on my Tuesday shows. My Tuesday shows is where I kind of like go through ideas that are permeating the ether out there and talk about those and into depth. I go more into depth with them. But so that's a little tongue tied, but that's what we got going on. So I'm working on something, and hopefully by next Tuesday it'll be ready, and it'll be pretty in depth. Hopefully I can get it all in an hour. But in the meantime, I'm just kind of looking out and I'm saying, all right, well, what are we still talking about? Well, we're still talking about DEI. Well, I don't really want to talk about DEI again. However, the conversation's still being had. So therefore, let's throw out some more information so that when you are listening, you are just more and more prepared to handle critics of like capitalism and the free market and freedom of opportunity and these sorts of things. Right. And so when people come to you with these attractive ideas, how do you respond? And I think in order to respond to things, you need to know what it is that they're saying. So you need to have a proper understanding of what they're trying to communicate to you. But then you have to also understand your own ideas as fully as you can. And this excerpt that I'm about to read here in just a few moments, I think that it accomplishes it's written very well. So right now, let's get with what Mr. Cuban said, and we'll put that up on the screen here. So he said, now he's talking. He's responding to Jordan Peterson, and their conversation is about something else, and I don't really want to go into it because I don't think it really is necessary. So he just said, I was with a group of people who were proponents of DEI. They asked me what I would do to reduce the resistance to DEI. I told them to do a search and replace in all of their materials for equality of outcomes to equality of opportunities. Every single person, let me scroll a little bit more. Every single person agreed that they never should have used equality of outcomes and said they would change the term. Thanks for watching or listening to the interview. Lex Friedman does a great job. So Mark Cuban was on Lex Friedman's show. Jordan Peterson watched it, made a critique of him, and then Mark Cuban responded. And this is his response is that, oh, well, what we're going to do is we're just going to go through and we're going to replace these words. We're going to change everywhere it says equality of outcome to equality of opportunities. But I still think it's misguided. And you might be asking yourself, like, well, DL, how could you say that? You haven't even seen the material. You don't even know what it says. But if you can just equality of outcome and equality of opportunity are entirely two different things. If you can just simply replace them, then that kind of suggests that the words surrounding them don't mean much. if you can replace them. Equality of outcomes is the result, which is what people seek when they push ideas like DEI, affirmative action back in the day, and other, whatever they're coming up with next. I've seen some hints at some newer things that they're coming up. There's always some new phrase. There's always some new acronym or whatever that they're trying to implement, and ultimately, it's all the same thing. They want the equality of outcomes. How do we know this? Well, one of the things they like to say is, they look at your company or your organization, and they'll tell you about what do they see. They're like, "Oh, I just see a bunch of white guys." Okay, well, that means you're not very diverse. Blah blah blah. You need all these programs because clearly you have a lack. Like you're not representative, and everything revolves around like that's the visual cue to people is whether or not there's representation. And then from there, they start implementing all these other ideas. Well, we need inclusion and we need equality or equity, whichever one they're using at the time. And so, I get it. I see what they're trying to accomplish, but the problem is, and we're going to see that in just a second. I think it's misguided and it's actually harmful at the end of the day because it's contrary to human nature and it doesn't leave humans in the position to be their best self. So let's take a look at this document here and I'm going to read through it and I think you are going to find, I struggled with the idea of reading it on air because I'm like literally reading somebody else's stuff and like can I do it? Can I give it justice? So on and so forth. I'm going to do my best. And if you stick with me for a few moments, I think what you're going to find is that it's a very valuable few minutes that you will have appreciated listening to. And I think you will gain something from it. So that's why I'm doing it because I think I can pull this off. So we're going to give it a shot. We're going to give it what I like to call the good old college try. So this is an excerpt from the book Capitalism, a Treatise on Economics, written by George Reisman, a professor of economics. And he wrote this, what is it, 1992? Yes, in 1992, this is when he wrote it. So these ideas aren't new. This notion of equality and the outcomes and all that, none of that is new, right? It's all old and it's been addressed many times over. And in this particular instance, I think Dr. Reisman, I think he does a great job. It's very easy read. If you wanted to read it yourself, you can go on Amazon. There's a link in the show notes, and I think it's just a few dollars. You can purchase it and you can read it for yourself, take notes, what have you. So let's go ahead and read this. This is called The Equality of Opportunity Doctrine, a Critique. Okay. The advocates of economic equality have a fallback position, which they also frequently use as a camouflage, namely the doctrine of equality of opportunity. They do not, they say, advocate anything so foolish or so extreme as the imposition of actual economic equality. All they advocate, they say, is that everyone have an equal chance. That is, as they put it, all the runners begin the race from the same starting line. Now, I want you to take a pause here for a moment. Have you seen that photo before of the women running against the men, the CEOs, and then like the men have it's on a track, one of those like quarter-mile tracks, and the men have like a clear path in their lanes, and in the lanes of the women, there's like dishwashing machine and washer and some other, like gendered items. I think there's like an ironing board or something like that, and it's like these are the hurdles, and this is this idea like people are hampered and so we need to clear out all these obstacles. Like this is what he's talking about, right? Like everybody needs to be at the same starting line, but there's also this notion where they'll say, well, everybody's a runner but not everybody starts at the same spot, right? So what that means is maybe I was born in poverty and somebody else was not, so therefore we weren't born in the same spot, and so therefore we need to equalize, and by equalizing we'll bring me, and me who was born in poverty in this story, not in real life, but me who was born in poverty, more equal to those who were not born in poverty. And so then I will have more of a fighting chance in that race, right? The rat race, if you will. All right, so let's continue on. On this basis, they feel free to advocate the confiscation of inheritances, public education through the postgraduate level, and laws preventing private discrimination on the basis not only of such factors as race, religion, or national origin, but also age, medical condition, and physical handicap. All right, so think about that for a second. Like and this is true. In order to accomplish these things, we put in all sorts of regulations to try to compensate. And we're going to see why this is not a good idea. Continuing on. The supporters of the equality of opportunity doctrine view opportunities as fundamentally external to the individual, in effect, as various dishes carried by waiters on trays, which, under capitalism, are arbitrarily served to some and withheld from others. They want the government to seize control, they say, not of the distribution of wealth and income, but merely of the distribution of these dishes, as it were. That is, of the opportunities to earn wealth and income, and so give everyone an equal chance. So again, he's describing what people are trying to accomplish. And this is true. They're trying to accomplish this scenario where everybody is starting the race at the same level. Because if we can do that, then everybody has the best opportunity to be who they can be. That's the notion that we're fighting against. And it's I mean, if you think about it, it's an attractive notion. I mean, who wants to say you start way back there, I'll start here, and let's have a race and we'll call that fair? Like nobody wants to do that. The unfortunate reality is that is life. Let's continue. To most people, this doctrine sounds eminently fair and reasonable, but in fact, it is as much against the nature of reality as is the doctrine of the out and out equality of wealth and income. This becomes clear as soon as we look beyond the inheritance of wealth and begin to consider other external factors that affect the opportunities an individual has. For example, consider such factors as the intelligence of a child's parents, their education and vocabulary, their system of values, and their love for him and treatment of him, not to mention their level of income and the kind of material life they lead and thereby expose him to while he is growing up. It is certainly arguable that differences in these factors confront a child with differences in opportunities that are certainly of no less significance for his future life, including his ability to earn wealth and income than those which are based on the wealth he may or may not inherit. So think of it this way. Really simple. Donald Trump's kids got much better opportunities than my son, right? Just based on the fact that he's wealthier and has more connections. Simple matter of fact, plain and simple. But as we're going to see, that doesn't mean that my son doesn't have opportunities. Let's continue. To create equality of opportunity with respect to these factors, nothing less would be necessary than to abolish the institution of the family and to raise all children in government orphanages, where they could all be brought up in exactly the same way. This, of course, was the idea of Plato, and it was supported by many socialists in the 19th century and earlier in this century. I want to pause here and tell you this is still the idea of many socialists. That's not the topic of conversation for today, but just keep it in mind. They have not let loose of the idea of destroying or abolishing the institution of the family. Let's continue. But even this would not be enough to achieve equality of opportunity, because even if all these environmental factors could be made the same, there would still remain enormous differences in the intellectual and physical endowment of the child himself based on his genetic inheritance. A highly intelligent, strong, and beautiful child, for example, automatically has enormous advantages over a stupid, weak, and ugly child who is given the same upbringing. You can tell this was written in the 90s because nobody would be allowed to write something like that today. Anyway, how can such different children and the adults they later become be given equality of opportunity? One possible answer to this question is that the government should concentrate more heavily on the upbringing of the less fortunate, thus, perhaps raising their intelligence, improving their strength, and possibly even their looks. but no amount of such extra effort by the government can significantly make up for what nature has denied. Thus, another possible answer is that the government should insist that such differences simply be disregarded. The first answer manifests itself today in large scale government support for special programs for the education of the retarded and the handicapped. The second, in those anti discrimination laws, such as California's, which prohibit discrimination in employment based on medical condition or physical handicap. Another possible answer is that, failing the government's ability to create equality of opportunity by raising up the less fortunate, it should tear down the more fortunate. If it cannot make the stupid intelligent, the weak strong, and the ugly beautiful, it can find a way to hamper or destroy intelligence, strength, and beauty, and so achieve equality of opportunity by making everyone stupid, weak, and ugly. It may be difficult to find anyone who would openly advocate such a policy, but it does follow logically from the goal of equality of opportunity. Now, I want to pause here. He's right that when you phrase it like that, you would be hard pressed to find somebody who would advocate such a thing. However, that's where dressing things up in nicer words comes into play. And this dressing of words allows us to present ideas as if they're going to produce a particular result, but the end result is really just destroying those who have been given something naturally or inhibiting it in some way. But that's really all that it does. But a lot of, and then this is why we need to be studious in reading and learning and understanding these concepts and ideas if we're going to be in this arena, the arena of ideas, because they these ideas come in cleverly, and you miss it, and you might even be deceived yourself if you're not paying attention. And when I say deceived, I mean deceived in terms of the actual outcome, the actual result, right? It's kind of like when we see a new bill and it's like the Inflation Reduction Act. Oh, well, that sounds pretty good. I kind of like that. I mean, who doesn't want to reduce inflation, right? Like that sounds like a good thing. However, the question isn't what does it sound like? What words do we use to make it come across as something that we would want? We need to look and say, all right, what are the actual results going to be? And if the actual results aren't very good, then that's what we need to base our judgment on. But we can only do that with proper understanding. All right, let's continue. There's a fourth conceivable answer. The government should attempt to determine the genetic endowment of children. It should enact a program of eugenics and attempt to breed children who would all possess the same characteristics at birth. Then, with the same upbringing, the demand for equality of opportunity could apparently at least be satisfied. Now, this sounds crazy, right? Like, okay, why are we talking about eugenics? We have actually have implemented or attempted to implement eugenics in history, in recent history, not just the Nazis either. Like it happened here in the I'm in the middle of a documentary right now. I started watching it like 2 or 3 days ago, unrelated to this whatsoever. I just happened to see it on YouTube, and I was like, "Oh, I'll watch this while I'm doing some work." And so I was listening to it, and basically this guy, and I don't remember his name at the moment, but he's a scientist and a researcher, and he likes counting things. And he likes to go through and document and then see what he can compare it to later. So he might say like, okay, today I ate this many grams of this, but then I felt like this. So tomorrow I'm going to eat a few less grams. I'm going to eat less grams tomorrow, and then see how I feel. Right. Like, so he's like constantly evaluating the world based on these metrics that he's identifying. And that ultimately led him to implement eugenics programs. And I don't mean like he went from testing his cereal to eugenics. I mean, just the idea of his research and wanting to quantify everything that led him to it. It manifested itself in simple things like maybe what he ate for breakfast, but then it also manifested in more insidious things like eugenics. So that is so even though he mentions eugenics here, That is not as far fetched and crazy as you might at first think, because we've actually seen that happen in recent history. Let's continue. These absurd and vicious implications of the equality of opportunity doctrine should make one begin to wonder what kind of idea equality of opportunity really is. In reality, it is not a legitimate ideal at all. It appears to represent justice only on the basis of a thoroughly confused view of the nature of opportunities and the causes of human success. I think this line describes like virtually every socialist out there. They are confused on the view of the nature of opportunities and the causes of human success. It doesn't get any more simple than that. Let us consider what opportunities actually are and then establish some important facts about them. An opportunity is merely an occasion on which successful action is possible. It is a situation that an individual can take advantage of to his gain. I'm going to read that one more time because I think this is very important. An opportunity is merely an occasion on which successful action is possible. It is a situation that an individual can take advantage of to his gain. So, in other words, when there's a possibility, an occasion where I can do something successful, that is an opportunity. So let's make an absurd example. I have a lake behind my house. If it's raining and storming, it's not an opportunity to go fishing. But if it's a nice clear day out, it is an opportunity to go fishing. If it's a nice clear day out, but it's extremely hot, it might not be a good opportunity to go. It might not be a good occasion to go fishing. And so I may not be successful in catching a fish. That is how you would look at what an opportunity really is. There are some days where there's an opportunity, there are some days where there's not. If I don't have a fishing pole, then I cannot, even though the opportunity is there, I cannot act upon it. It requires at least having a fishing pole, maybe a fishing hook and a worm, whatever bait that I want to use, right? Or at least a net so I can at least try to scoop up a fish. But the idea here is that there is an opportunity regardless of whether or not I'm prepared for it. It's just a situation where I could take advantage of something to my gain. So let's continue. What needs to be realized about opportunities is, first of all, that there is no scarcity of them. They arise again and again. The second thing that needs to be understood is that what is important in connection with them and deserves to be fought for as a matter of both justice and universal self interest is not that vicious absurdity, the equality of opportunity, but the freedom of opportunity. What the freedom of opportunity means is, and why it is so important, will be explained shortly. Finally, what needs to be understood about opportunities is that they can be and regularly are created by individuals. Indeed, opportunities are themselves products of human thought and action. Just how they are is something that will also be explained shortly. Let us consider the abundance of opportunities. An opportunity exists every time there is the possibility of improving oneself in any way. If one is penniless and there is an unfilled job available, that one, let me go back. If one is penniless and there is an unfilled job available that one has the ability to fill, one has the opportunity of ending one's pennilessness. If one has a job and there is any better job available that one has the ability to fill, one has the opportunity to improve one's position further. If there is any skill that one does not possess but is capable of acquiring, then one has the opportunity of expanding one's skills. When I met my wife, we lived in Charlotte and she took a new opportunity with the company she was working for and she moved down to Jacksonville. We were planning on having a long distance relationship. And initially, at the time, unrelated to our relationship, I was looking into getting involved in web development. And I was hanging around a bunch of web developers, and some of them were teaching me some of the basics of web development. And I decided that was a path I wanted to pursue. I literally did not have that skill. And this is in my mid 30s. I was like 36 or 35. I don't know, something like that. I was like 35 or 36. And I did not have the skill of web development. And I learned that skill. I acquired it. I took the time and the energy to learn the skill. And then, I mean, and I had a few failed interviews. And then eventually, as I kept going, I was able to land a job as a web developer for a company, right? So this is exactly how it plays out, is that I didn't have a skill. I went and I acquired it. So how did he say it here? Um, the possibility of improving oneself in any way. I improved myself. I went from not having that skill to having the skill and knowing about it and being able to demonstrate it to people who would be willing to pay me to exercise that skill for them. That's basically what I did. Let's continue. In fact, in the nature of the case, the economic opportunities potentially open to the individual far, far exceed his ability to exploit them, with the result that he must choose among them, selecting some and rejecting others. This follows from the fact that there is always room for improvement in the satisfaction of man's wants, and that the basis for carrying out such improvement is the performance either of more labor or of more productive labor. In other words, built into the fact that man's wants can always be satisfied more fully or better is the opportunity for the performance of more labor as the means of satisfying them more fully or better, and the opportunity for improving the productivity of his labor. Okay, that's a long sentence. Let's break it down. Basically, what he's saying here is, like, as long as you have a desire to have something more, there's an opportunity to improve your labor or the output of your labor. Like, I can get better at doing something, or I can be more efficient at it. So maybe I'm not necessarily like, maybe instead of, like, I can learn to lift, like, let's say I have to carry 50-pound bags of sand across a warehouse, and I have to do that like all day long. Well, there's a couple of opportunities. One, I can improve myself personally, and I can say, all right, well, I'm just going to get stronger. And so maybe outside of work, I start going to the gym and start pushing, heavier weights, so that by, eventually I can lift maybe 2 bags at a time. Right. So now I could carry 100 bags, 100-pound bags, 100 pounds of 2 bags, right? That may not be the most ideal, but the other opportunity is to find some way to get more of those bags in the same trip. So maybe I use a wheelbarrow, or I use, a wagon or something else, right? And so I stack them up on something, and then I push them over on a cart, right? Like, that's me being more efficient. So I can be more efficient just in the way that I do it, or I can be stronger, and so I could do it faster. And it depends. Like, different things will have different needs. So sometimes you'll need to get better at something specifically. Like, maybe you need more knowledge, right? Maybe you need to be stronger or faster or whatever the case may be. In other cases, maybe there's some other implement that you can add that will allow you to be more efficient, more productive. But in any case, if it took me 4 hours to get all the bags I needed over, and now I can do it in two. Well, now I've just improved myself and the work that I'm doing. So there's a value there. That's basically what it means. So indeed, on the basis of what has been established earlier in this book, in chapter 2, it follows that in the nature of things, there are potentially limitless opportunities for both increasing employment and for raising the productivity of labor, where there are virtually limitless possibilities for improvement in the satisfaction of man's wants. Indeed, the potential opportunities for employment always dwarf man's ability actually to work, which is a major reason why he must be concerned with raising the productivity of his labor. So, the opportunities for employment, they will always they will always exceed what I actually can put out. So there are plenty of jobs out there, and I can't do them all. So the point that he's making here, you're not boxed in as an individual. There's always an opportunity to be sought somewhere. You can improve in some way, you can learn something new, you can acquire a new skill, what have you. So there's always this opportunity that is available. You just need to seek it out. That's where he's going. People may wonder, of course, how it can be true that there are virtually limitless employment opportunities, and yet, at the same time, the world in which we live in is characterized by chronic mass unemployment, and the experience of millions is that they have no opportunity for work. There is a simple reconciliation of these facts, namely, misguided laws and social institutions deny man the freedom of exploiting the opportunities for employment that the nature of reality offers him, and so force unemployment on him. Okay, what are we saying here? We're saying when we start adding all these rules and all these laws and these legislation, they get in our way and they take away some of those opportunities. Since yeah, I've been seeing it lately. It's always on the table to talk about, but I've been seeing it pop up a little bit more lately. Uh, Minimum wage, and I think there was something about McDonald's $20 an hour or something like that minimum. And so when we look at these misguided laws and social institutions that are denying the freedom of exploiting the opportunities for employment, we're saying something like, well, if you make the minimum wage $20 an hour, then you've kneecapped somebody like me who might try to say, well, I don't have the skills just yet to compete with these other folks. So therefore, let me offer you 15 my labor for $15 an hour. So now we're going to make a gamble. I'm making a gamble that this is going to benefit me if I take a lower wage than what is being offered. You're going to take a gamble by saying, well, I'm going to offer a lower wage by somebody who believes that even though they may not appear to be prepared for this particular position, they can show me, they can learn quickly enough and adapt to make it worth my while. That's what regulations do. They limit the opportunities that you have because let's say let's go back to my argument about my little scenario where I'm carrying bags of sand. I am a 5'3", 120-pound fellow. So I'm not very big. And if I'm sitting there in a line of guys and all the other guys are like 6 foot, 250 pounds, and you're looking for somebody that can carry or can transfer, 40-pound, 40, 50-pound bags of sand from one side of a building to another all day long, every day as part of my job, are you really going to look at me, or are you going to, are you going to look at these bigger guys and say, okay, well, they're bigger and they have, bigger arms, and bigger legs and a bigger neck and just, bigger almost everything. Let's leave it at that. Right. But basically they're bigger. So clearly for a physical task like this, they're going to be better suited. So it doesn't appear that I have that opportunity, but I can create an opportunity by challenging the person who's hiring and saying, well, you're offering all these guys $20 an hour. I'll do it for 15 and I'll show you that I can do it. But that employer might say, well, we have regulations and I can't hire anybody for under $20 an hour. So that's an opportunity I cannot exploit. I cannot exploit I cannot exploit the idea that maybe this person would like to pay a little bit less, at least for a short time, because I'm probably going to come back later and say, all right, now that I've shown you I can do the job, I'd like a raise. Right. That's probably going to happen. But that's the point here. Like when you exploit an opportunity, you can only exploit an opportunity that is available to you, whatever that opportunity is. All right, let's continue reading. The problem of unemployment is the result. And by the way, if I couldn't get the job, then I would be unemployed, right? Even though there was an opportunity there and maybe I could fulfill that role. The problem of unemployment is the result of the violation of the freedom of opportunity, the violation of man's freedom to exploit the opportunities that reality offers him. The freedom of opportunity means, to be precise, the ability to exploit the opportunities afforded by reality without being stopped by the initiation of physical force. So back to my story, my little scenario of me saying I'm going to carry all these bags, these 50-pound bags of sand for $15 an hour. That is me exploiting the opportunity afforded by reality. It would be a reality. I could do that. but I cannot be stopped by the initiation of physical force, which would be the government that says, if you hire DL for $15 an hour, you will be punished. That's basically physical force, right? That's the government's version of physical force because it could culminate into actual physical force, right? So if I don't have that opportunity and it's because somebody made legislation, they took that opportunity from me. That's not how we that's contrary to human nature because I might be willing to do that. And maybe I'm not. Maybe I might say, okay, $20 an hour. I'd sure like 20 bucks an hour, but guy over here is offering $18 an hour for something else, which I think I have a better chance of getting, right? So I can make the choice if I want. But if you kneecap me, if you take it away through legislation, then that opportunity isn't there. And I'm forced to find some other opportunity as opposed to choosing a different opportunity. People are unable to find work not because there is no work for them to do in reality, but because government and labor union interferences based on the initiation of physical force prices their labor beyond the reach of potential employers. This interference is, specifically, the inflation of the money supply, which sets the stage for later financial contraction and depression, coupled with so called pro labor legislation. We'll ignore that for the purposes of this conversation. That's an entirely different one. The precise ways in which such interferences serve to cause unemployment are explained later in this book. For now, however, it may be helpful to realize that, for example, employers have the financial ability to pay $1 trillion a year in payrolls, and there are 100 million workers able and willing to work. Those payrolls would be capable of employing all those workers at an average annual wage of $10,000 per year. But to the extent that the government and the unions keep in force an average annual wage greater than 10,000, the payroll funds are rendered incapable of employing that many workers. The result is that corresponding unemployment is caused and can be made to continue to exist indefinitely. Now, he's using a larger set of numbers to describe the same thing, one of the same or a problem with minimum wage requirements, which is if an employer has so much money, right? Like they have $1,000 and they might be able to say, okay, well, we're going to pay $100 each to 10 people. But if government comes along and says, nope, you can only pay a minimum of 150. Well, then I now can no longer pay 10 people. It is too early to do the math on that, but it is fewer than 10 people. So I might have been in a situation as an employer to employ 10 people, but because of a regulation, I now am not. And so one or more people are now not going to be hired. Therefore, that restriction has created unemployment and it's stopped those people from exploiting their opportunity with me if I was the employer. All right, let's continue on. Where are we? Thus, as this example indicates, unemployment and the lack of employment opportunity are not the result of any fundamental or metaphysical lack of employment opportunity, but of the government's violation of the freedom of opportunity with respect to unemployment. In essence, first, the government creates the boom bust cycle, and then when the bust comes, it and the coercive labor unions, its sanctions prohibit businessmen and wage earners from offering and accepting the lower wage rates that would be and that would enable them to sufficiently exploit the limitless employment opportunities that reality offers to the point of establishing full employment. Let's make that simple. If regulations, wherever they come from, whether they're moved by labor unions or just simple raw legislation, if there are regulations that say you can only pay $20 an hour, and an employer might have been able in a position to hire 10 people if he could have paid them $10 an hour, but now has to pay them $20 an hour, which means he's only going to be able to hire half with that same amount of money. 5 people are now unemployed as opposed to they might have been employed. And you can look at it this way. $10 per hour, from my perspective as somebody looking to be employed, is better than $0 an hour. That's what he's saying. Like 10 or zero. Take your pick. But there was an opportunity there because the employer could have adjusted their wages and said, okay, well, you know what? This job is probably worth $20 an hour, but I might be willing to hire you for 10, and therefore I can hire another person at 10. So now two people get their opportunity, right? They get to exploit the opportunity, which was a realist. It was an opportunity that existed in reality, right? It was just taken away through regulation. As shown elsewhere in this book, the violation of freedom of opportunity is also what underlies the problems described under the head of racial discrimination. Their solution, too, would follow from the establishment of freedom of opportunity. I stated that opportunities are themselves products. What I mean by this is the following. In any given instance, an opportunity is the result of a combination of external circumstances and the skills and abilities an individual possesses, such that he is able to exploit the circumstances to his advantage. An opportunity is a product in the sense that the skills and ability an individual possesses are the result of his successful exploitation of previous lesser opportunities. This is where we're going to start getting into this whole DEI nonsense. Okay. We're going to, because you might have been like, hey, DL, we're not even talking about DEI, but we're going to address that. Don't worry. We are getting there. It must be realized that opportunities are never a matter merely of external circumstances that are served up on a plate, as it were. They always depend on what the individual himself brings to the external circumstances in the way of skills and abilities. These skills and abilities, in turn, are never the automatic result of the individual's genetic inheritance. They are the cumulative product of what the individual has done with his life up to that point. They reflect his initial choices to use his genetic inheritance to deal with external circumstances in ways that developed certain skills and abilities, and then further choices to use those skills and abilities to deal with further external circumstances in ways that developed still further skills and abilities, and so on up to the present moment. What is all of that saying? Let's say that I grew up in a household with a piano and my mom played the piano, which is actually a true scenario. I had the opportunity to develop the skill of playing the piano. And if I practiced every day, then I would get better at it. And I would start out that maybe I can do, I can play the scales. And then eventually now I can play Mary Had a Little Lamb. And then I play a little bit harder song, a little bit. And then eventually I'm playing some Mozart or Beethoven or what have you. Right. And eventually now I have this skill that has grown over time because I seized an opportunity that was in front of me. Okay. And eventually I might be able to utilize that opportunity for something else. Maybe I'm applying to something and they want to know what things that I do outside of the skill that I'm bringing. Maybe I want to be a web developer and they're like, hey, what other things do you got going on? And I say, well, on the side, I love playing the piano. And sometimes I go to nursing homes and I play the piano for the old folks there. Right. Maybe I say that. And so maybe that gives me a little bit of an edge at this job because now they're like, oh, you know what? We've got two candidates here. Both of them seem about qualified. But this guy over here, he goes to the nursing home and he plays the piano and he's got other interests and he pursues them. We like that. That's the kind of thing that we would like to have in our company because he is somebody that we could boast about having. We can say, yeah, we've got developers here, and some of our developers do things on the side for other people. For instance, DL, who is really great at the piano, which I'm not, by the way, he's really great at the piano. He goes to nursing homes and he plays for old people. And that sounds good. Like now their business has benefited simply by saying we employ a guy who plays piano for the old folks. Now, let's say I don't have a piano growing up. Well, I can't do all that, but maybe I have something else. And that is what I exploit. And so there, and I don't have a readily available example, but let's say there's something else that I exploit and I can use that instead. And so maybe the opportunity to use in the future, the piano playing doesn't exist, but maybe something else does. And this is the point that Dr. Reisman is making. There's no shortage of opportunities, but we have to be willing to develop them. We have to be willing to develop them based on what we have. So let me give you another example. And this one's kind of old, and I don't really do sports analogies and comparisons very often because I don't follow sports very well. But there was a guy named Spud Webb when I was younger. And I think he's still alive, but I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. His name is Spud Webb, and he was like 5 foot something. He was a short guy, and he played basketball in the NBA. Like, that's pretty much unheard of. He might have been about my height. He might have actually been a little bit shorter. I can't remember exactly. I'm 5'3". I don't know how tall he was, but I know he was really short for a basketball player. And he worked really, really hard to develop his skills so that he could overcome the fact that he was born shorter. Because when you're born shorter, you have a disadvantage. You're not on equal footing whatsoever on the basketball court for any number of reasons. Think about arm length, right? Like, I'm trying to shoot a basket, and the guy who's 7 foot tall, he can basically just put his arm up, his, like 4 foot arm, and like now he's covering like this huge distance from me. And so it's very, very difficult for me to overcome that because I'm so short. It's basically, he might as well just put a basket over me, a giant basket. And so it's very, very difficult. In order for me to get past that, I'm going to have to develop myself in such a way that I can deal with it. But I first have to acknowledge that there is that difference, and that the only way to combat that difference is to develop a skill, or some sort of technique or something that would allow me to compete against somebody who was born naturally taller and has a natural advantage over me. All right, let's see. I think we read everything on his page. So, for example, a child who chooses to use his mind to learn arithmetic thereby creates an indispensable precondition for the potential opportunity to learn algebra. Unless and until he learns arithmetic, there can be no possibility of any opportunity for him to learn algebra. If he does learn arithmetic, and then, when he is confronted with the opportunity of learning algebra, successfully exploits it too, he creates a necessary internal basis for the further opportunity of learning calculus, and so on. It is similar with regard to employment. The individual who exploits the opportunity to become a worker in a factory thereby creates a possible basis for his later on becoming a foreman there. If he becomes a foreman, he creates a possible basis for later promotion to a higher managerial position, and so on. Of course, he will have to expand his abilities in each of these jobs and possibly acquire other skills off the job as well, perhaps by going to night school, for example. The principle is that opportunity presents itself as the rungs of a ladder. Each rung is open only to those who have climbed within reach by ascending previous rungs. Once things are viewed in this light, the notion of the advocates of equality of opportunity, that opportunities are a matter of environmental circumstances or environmental circumstances combined with genetic inheritance, appears absurdly inadequate. It is actually ludicrous to think that what a person does is the outcome merely of his environment and genes. In between the environment and the genes is a lifetime of choices which each of which has a vital bearing on the individual's ability to deal with his environment to make further choices. In between the environment and the genes is the whole life of a person as a being who functions on a level above that of an automaton. Okay, that was a lot of words there to say. If you put in the effort, you can overcome the circumstances that are around you and whatever you've inherited. That doesn't mean you can overcome everything. There is a certain limit. If you were not born a genius, you were born of average intelligence, you are probably not going to be challenging Einstein's theory of relativity. But if you apply yourself well enough, you might. It's still a possibility, right? Just chances are pretty low compared to somebody who was born a genius. On the other hand, just being born a genius doesn't mean you get to challenge the theory of relativity. So I could be a genius of 190 IQ, right? I think it's a pretty high number. I don't know. I don't know what Einstein's was, but let's say I have 190 IQ. If I don't read any science books, don't read any books on physics and quantum mechanics and light and all those things, right? If I'm not reading these books, guess what doesn't happen? I don't get to the point where I can challenge the theory of relativity. I have to develop myself. I can't just rely on what I have. Well, the same applies in the opposite. Just because you weren't born with a natural tendency for something, doesn't mean that you can't still exploit it with hard work. It might it might require a lot of hard work, right? But it's still an opportunity, and it's up to you to decide to where you can take that opportunity. I like a quote from we get myself in trouble here. The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump. We could disregard whether or not he wrote it or not. I get all that. But he was in there in his book. He says something to the effect of, if you're young and you're trying to get like investors and people to take a risk on you. He said, sometimes you don't have the experience to rely on. You can't say, well, I did this thing here and I did this thing here. So therefore, this is why you should take a risk on me because I've already shown myself. He said, so what you have to do is you have to give the impression of success. You kind of got to give the people that you're trying to get to invest in, take a risk on you. You got to get them to believe that, man, he doesn't have any success behind him just yet, but man, we can see success pouring out of him practically, right? Like you have to give that impression. It's the same concept here. You've got to you've got to be willing to get people to see what might be there, even if it's not. And sometimes that's a benefit to you. And many people have been successful by doing that model. I mean, if you go back, I remember in like the 2000s or so, there was some articles. This was back when it was really popular to make fun of the millennials and like, oh, the millennials, they don't want to, they don't want to do this, they don't want to do that, blah, blah, blah. We were giving them a hard time and they're like, we're just working really hard and, it's just unfair. The world is cruel, right? And like all those kind of things. And there were articles where people were saying like, look, I just went in and bluffed my way into a job. I faked it till I made it. Fake it till you make it was this notion. And then people got really mad because they didn't want to fake it. They didn't want to have to do. But this is how humans are successful. I mean, or at least aim for success and in some ways be successful. I mean, it doesn't always work, right? Like I could go and practice basketball like Michael Jordan did for 4 hours every single day. Will that necessarily make me the next Michael Jordan? Not necessarily. I might need, because maybe he has been gifted more skill to begin with. I might need to practice 6 hours a day in order to compensate for the lack that I was gifted, right? Naturally. But the 4 hours a day, I might be able to become somebody that's maybe not quite Michael Jordan level, but somewhere a few rungs down the ladder, right? So maybe I'm a really good player, and I am notable and named, so people see that. But otherwise, I don't get to become Michael Jordan. And going back to the book, um, Donald Trump says, like, aim to be a billionaire, and if you end up becoming a millionaire, well, that's not so bad, is it? Right? And but in order to do any of those things, you first have to acknowledge what you don't have and then seek to acquire or compensate for it. And when we look at it that way, that's how we get to success. And so this whole DEI nonsense of, well, we need diversity and we need equality and we need inclusion. No, you don't. You just need to get out of people's way. That's it. Get out of their way. Let them figure it out. I should have I didn't think about it until just now. Let me give you one more example and you can look it up. Maybe I'll even throw it in the show notes, even though I'm not going to play it on the video here. Um, there was a young man. He used to, I don't know if he still does, he used to work as an engineer for NASCAR. He was born without arms, no arms, like from the shoulder down, no arms. And there's video of him as a young guy. He engineered a lot of things because he had to figure out, how can I eat with a spoon? How can I ride a bicycle with all the other kids? How can I do all these things? And there's videos of him, eating his cereal with a spoon, riding a bicycle. He even drives a car. He can get in and drive a car. And then they showed him in the video when he went to work, his keyboard and his mouse were on the floor and he was doing engineering with his feet. He acquired a skill. Would it have been nice if we had made all these things for him? Maybe. But would he be in the position that he is today? Would he be as skilled as he would otherwise have been had those, see, I want to say that. Would he be as skilled if people had said, well, let's try to level you up so that you're on par. We will do all these things for you so you don't have to try to figure it out. We will do those for you. And that way, it's not your fault that you were born without arms. So we as a society, we want to make sure that you have this equality of opportunity. So we're going to make all these adaptations for you. Would he be as good of an engineer? Probably not, because every time he had to solve a problem as a little kid, went toward, think of it as like putting something in a bucket. Okay, I got to figure out how to eat with a fork or a knife and a spoon or whatever. So here's the skill I'm gonna develop. Bam, he puts that into a bucket now, right? So now he's got this, he's got this skill set in a bucket. Oh man, I want to ride a bicycle. Like, that's a challenge, right? So he figures something out. Bam, he puts that in there. So all this while, he's building this skill of ingenuity and solving problems. We could have solved it for him, but then he wouldn't have acquired all of those skills and he wouldn't have been able to exploit opportunities as he went along because he wouldn't need to, because we made the minimum, said, all right, well, we'll get you in there to having a job. But maybe he wouldn't have worked for NASCAR. Maybe it would have been something else that wasn't as exciting. This is the problem with DEI, with trying to let people up for them. We harm them by preventing them from developing their own self and seeing what they're actually capable of. Human beings are much more capable than we give them credit for. And we need to stop interfering with their ability to succeed. I'm gonna read a little bit more. I thought I could get through more of this than I actually did, but I don't think I'm gonna be able to get through all of it. But I think I'm making the point here. It is not necessary that people make the choices that develop their skills and abilities at any precise moment. There is considerable leeway, and it is never completely too late to start. For example, someone can learn to read even in old age and then begin rapidly to build on that foundation. So that's another good point to make. I mean, think about this. At 35, 36, I decided I was going to become a web developer. And I just started hanging around other web developers and learning from them. That's what I did. That's how I learned. Now, I had some other opportunities that were available to me. I took a whole year off of work because I said, all right, I'm going all in. I'm going to study. And then after about a year, I went and I got a job, right? Now, not everybody has the opportunity to take a year off, but everybody has the opportunity to learn something new. And you have it at any given moment. I'm 45 now, and I'm still learning how to do my podcast, how to work the technology, how to improve my graphics, how to improve my delivery and stop saying like and what else did I say? Like and right. Those are my big ones. Like, I still have that opportunity and I'm 45. There is no shortage of opportunities, no matter how young or old you are. It's only a matter of what you're willing to do. And you we take away from people, we remove the desire, the need, if we try to do everything for them. In a free society with its super abundance of opportunities, with no fixed deadline on the process of developing one's skills to better exploit them, all talk of inequality of opportunity must be judged as just so much whining and excuse making. In such a society, everyone, whatever his starting point in life, is able to raise himself very far, if that is what he chooses to do. He can miss many, many opportunities, and still there will be more. He can begin improving his ability to exploit them at any time and start moving up from that moment. So I've missed plenty of opportunities, and I can boo-boo lip about them. I can cry about it. And I can say, well, somebody should have made it a little bit easier for me to try to take that opportunity. Or I can recognize and say, you know what? It's up to me to develop myself so that when an opportunity arises, I'm prepared for it. As they say, luck favors the prepared. So is it really luck? It is true that in such a society, if two individuals were born equal in every respect, except that one had richer parents than the other, and if they both actively and constantly chose to develop their skills and abilities from birth on, the one with the richer parents would probably always be ahead of the one with the poorer parents. But far from representing any kind of embarrassment to a free society, it is perfectly just that these things be this way. The advantages of the individual with the richer parents would not prevent the one from with the poorer parents from rising, and rising not only very high, but without any fixed limit. It is simply the case that wealth is beneficial, and if everything else is in fact the same, it makes a difference. But what else is wealth for if not to provide benefits? And more fundamentally, what are parents for if not to provide every possible benefit to their children? One of the ugliest consequences of the equality of opportunity doctrine is that it actually causes some parents deliberately to do less for their children than they otherwise would, on the grounds that other parents are unable to do as much and therefore willfully to default on their responsibility as parents. Furthermore, as explained in the discussion of the institution of inheritance, everyone, non heirs as well as heirs, benefits from the capital that is accumulated in order to be passed on to heirs. The non heir is thus able to achieve much more than he would have in the absence of the institution of inheritance, even if that is less than what someone else can achieve who is equally capable in every respect and has the benefit of an inheritance. I'm going to stop here in the essence of time, but I'm going to leave it at this. Let's summarize what we just read here, and I'm going to put it in the context of my own family and my own son. We are not billionaires. You probably have already guessed that. Okay. And my son does not have the opportunities afforded to him that a billionaire's son has on the virtue of the wealth itself. However, that is no excuse for him to not develop himself and see how far he can go, because the sky is the limit. Or in reality, there is no limit. He can become as successful as he chooses to be and as successful as he's willing to work toward. I, as a parent, have no excuse in not trying to do my best to help him out. So maybe I cannot provide him with billions, but maybe I can provide him with millions. Or maybe I can only provide him with thousands. Or maybe I can only provide him with hundreds. Whatever the case may be, the more I can provide him, the more capital, the better off he'll be than if I had not. The comparison is, what can I do? Not what can I provide compared to this other person? That's what we need to focus on, is what can I provide them? And then materially. And then what can they do on their own? And we have plenty of stories of people who came from absolutely nothing, terrible situations, and they are now very, very successful. Oprah Winfrey is one of them. She was born in poverty, was abused as a child, and she's now a billionaire in a media mogul. She is one of those stories of somebody that was able to take opportunities and exploit them repeatedly over and over and over. And whatever it is that was about her, she didn't miss the opportunities that she needed to get herself to this point. Does that mean that everybody can be a billionaire? No. But the question isn't, can I be a billionaire or not? It is, can I be successful? Can I exploit opportunities in front of me? And what opportunities might I be able to exploit if we didn't have regulation? This is what I believe DEI does. It limits our opportunities because it tells us you don't need to fight for this. You don't need to overcome anything. You don't need, if I'm a short guy, right? I'm 5'3". If height were an issue, which technically it tends not to be, like you don't really see anybody talking about DEI and height, right? Although the argument tends to be that taller people have make more money than shorter people. So I could, in some ways, say, well, it's unfair that presidents tend to be 6 foot taller, right? Or CEOs tend to be tall people. Like I could say it's unfair in that we need to implement some sort of program for inclusion. And, because I would like to be a CEO of a major company one day, but because of my height being stacked against me, because of my height, I am not in a position to do that. So I could ask society to accommodate for me, or I can figure out what opportunities I need to exploit to make that happen. And so ask yourself, if I find those opportunities and I exploit them myself, then am I not a better CEO than I would have been had other people just made the necessary accommodations, the minimum accommodations for me to give it a shot? Aren't I not a better CEO in that case because I had to fight for it? And this, I think, is the damage that DEI does to our society. And we can talk about like airline pilots and are they going to hire, less qualified people and all that stuff. I think ultimately we are creating a society where people do not learn to be all they can be, to steal a phrase from the army, I think it is. That's what we should create a society on. You need to be all that you can be. Right now, with our son, we're introducing him to all sorts of things, basketball and soccer and, robotics classes and all that. Not because I think he should engage in every single one of them to the fullest, but because what I want to do is I want to show him all these different things. And then once he's experienced them, he can decide which one he really likes and wants to pursue more. So he might say, like, I would be, I think my impression is that he will choose soccer over basketball. Wasn't a big fan of basketball, and that's fine. So now, but he's experienced it. So he's got an, and he can decide whether or not that's something he actually likes and can pursue or wants to pursue. But if he doesn't like it, then that's cool. He can pursue something else. But he at least has the foundation, the knowledge. So if later he says, you know what? All my friends are playing basketball. I think I'm going to get into basketball too. Well, guess what? Now he's got a small foundation. And because we're teaching him to exploit opportunities and to learn and to improve himself at any time that he wants to get into basketball, he will have that, just like we read, he will have the opportunity to improve himself. Will he become an NBA star? Maybe not, but that's okay. Maybe he'll just be the star on the court down the road, right? And among all his friends. And that'll make him feel really good on his spare time to go down and play basketball with his friends when he's older, because he decided that he was going to get into it and wasn't going to be stopped by whatever things that might be against him. Maybe the other kids are taller, but maybe he works a little bit harder, becomes very good at it, enough to play at the local ball court down the road. And now he is kind of like the star and can enjoy a Saturday afternoon feeling good about himself. Maybe that's all that it ends up being. But it only ends up being even that much if we recognize our limitations and then recognize that we have the power to overcome our limitations. But when we implement processes and manifest all these ideas like DEI, then we're taking away from people that which we are born with, which is the opportunity, or I don't want to say opportunity, I'm gonna try to use different word, which is the innate quality of overcoming our circumstances. That is why DEI is destructive beyond just, the results that we're going to end up seeing. It's destructive because it doesn't push people to be who they really can be. It says, we'll accommodate for you. We'll take care of it. And again, there are some situations where, yes, it would be appropriate, but we have to learn to balance that. It might be appropriate to say, let's have a ramp in the front of the building so everybody in a wheelchair can more easily get up. There's a flight of stairs, and so they can more easily get up to the top. But after that, maybe the accommodations become fewer because you need to figure it out, right? And it's a balancing act. And that's what I think we should focus on, the balancing act and learning to overcome. All right, folks, I want to thank you for watching. Hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern, for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer, my Rumble channel. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Lastly, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.